Welcome to Golf Smarter Mulligan's number 63. I'm Fred Green. Dr. Robert K. Winters, a.k.a. Dr. Bob, is the author of 10 Commandments of Mind Power Golf and Mistake-Free Golf, First Aid for Your Golfing Brain. He is also the Resident Sports Psychologist at the David Leadbetter Golf Academy World Teaching Headquarters and a regular contributor to the Golf Channel and Golf Smarter. In this episode from Golf Smarter number 151, we open up the listener mailbag and have Dr. Bob answer some mental game questions that could apply to any golfer. Welcome back to Golf Smarter, Dr. Bob.
Thank you so much, Fred, and thank you for having me on. It's been a while now, but it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, it has been a long time. Last time you were here, we talked about the 10 Commandments of Mind Power Golf, the book that we still have available on our website at our Smarter shopping page that people can pick up. I've gone through it numerous times. I find it to be very helpful and a quick read, so a lot of things it's easy to go back to. And those 10 Commandments right there on the back page, so you easily get right to it. I want to start with asking you about, you work with golfers on so many different levels, both competitive golfers and amateur golfers, recreational golfers. Is there a common thread that you witness to what we're doing wrong?
To what we're doing wrong, all golfers?
Yeah.
Well, I think all golfers, the first thing, we're human beings, and we suffer, the same dilemmas, day after day after day. One of the things we know in psychotherapy is that, everyone says to a lesser or greater degree, I will never be like that person. I will not let myself get in that condition or that psychological or mental condition. This won't happen to me. And I hear that happen a lot with golfers because they are human and they make the same mistakes over and over and over. And these mistakes are stepping into a shot, hitting a shot when you know you're not ready, knowing you should back off, knowing that you've lost your commitment, but you go ahead and hit it anyway. I mean, I see that, in amateurs, in beginning golfers. I even see it in the elite level players, that they just lost their focus, they lost their commitment, but they said, well, I've done it so many years, I'll go ahead and do it anyway and try to get away with it. And then what happens? It comes back, and it comes back to hurt them. So, yes, we see a lot of common threads among all golfers. But, golf is a game that doesn't discriminate. It does not. It doesn't care, how rich you are, how smart you are, how motivated or unmotivated you are. All the golf ball cares about is to strike the impetus that's put, upon it. And that strike is what we create. And the golf ball just, responds to that strike. So, that's sort of where we can kind of get started. I mean, it's just a myriad of different things that golfers of all ages, skill levels, genders, we all experience pretty much the same thing to a greater or lesser degree. It just depends what you really want to focus upon.
Boy, that may be the easiest thing to remember for all golfers is that the golf ball doesn't care who you are.
The golf ball has no ego, and that's the whole point. We have egos, we have personalities, we have agendas, and we also have expectations.
Yes.
The golf ball has none of these. The golf ball could care less. And I think it was great what Dr. Kerry Middlecoff said back in the 50s and 60s about his performance. He said, I really came to the realization that the golf ball and the game doesn't really care what I do. And he even went on to say, 500 million Chinese people could give a hoot whether I make this 3-foot putt for the Masters or not. He goes, my wife will still love me, my dog will still recognize me, I'll still have a good meal tonight. So why am I so scared? Why am I putting so much pressure on myself? So he was able to frame or reframe the situation to take, the pressure off of him. But he came to the realization that really the golf ball doesn't care. And sometimes we care, and we care way too much, Fred. So I think we need to kind of get back to that single common denominator that, hey, this is a game about getting the ball in the hole in the most economical manner, efficiently and effectively. And if we can do that, we are well on our way to playing great golf.
Absolutely. I was looking over your website today, drbobwinters.com, and it's drbob Winters, Dr. Bob Winters today. And, like on the foreword that you have in your book, you have a great little video introducing you on your website from David Leadbetter. And you are the mental coach for the Leadbetter Academy, correct?
That is correct. I am the resident sports psychologist at our world teaching headquarters at Champions Gate, and I've been with David now personally as his resident sports psychologist and work with all of his players and even his children now for the past 9 years. And David Leadbetter absolutely is the consummate master teaching professional, and obviously I think he's the best in the world. And we have, I think, now 30 David Leadbetter Golf Academies all over the globe, and I actually send out information to all of our different academies about what's new in the world of psychology, neuropsychology, sports vision, sports psychology, and everything that involves the mental game. So I've become hopefully a very vital part of the David Leadbetter Golf Association and the David Leadbetter Golf Academies, and I really have to thank David for that, because he's just been great to me, not only as a colleague, a companion in golf education, but a good friend.
That's very nice. What is it about David that sets him apart and sets his schools apart as far as what he provides to the students?
Well, I think most people through the years have seen David Leadbetter as the ultimate technocrat, that he makes things very difficult and very laborious, and nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, that's really what a master teacher does. He understands the complexity of a golf swing or of a motor function, and can actually break it down and keep it very simple and very utilitarian for each player. So he gives each player something very specific, very applied to work on, and I think that's really what makes David fun to work with. Also, he keeps things very humorous. Most people don't realize about David is that he has, as they say in Boston, Massachusetts, he has a wicked sense of humor. He really does. He's very, very funny. He has a very dry wit, very English, with his South African upbringing, but very, very British in his wit, and I just love it. And I always have to sort of keep my toes, because he's always pulling like these little pranks around the academy, and he is quite the storyteller as well. And I think that's very appealing to many of his students. They get to see not only a serious technical side that can help them right away, but he's very personable and he's very gracious, and he really gives so much of himself to the game. And he's just been a real pleasure to be around, and I'm very, very glad that I'm associated with David Leadbetter.
Well, we have another David Leadbetter instructor, a master instructor, coming on the Golf Smarter podcast in the next few weeks. Sean Hogan's going to be joining us, and I understand he's worked with David a lot as well.
Well, Sean is probably David's right-hand man. Sean goes out on tour on all the senior and PGA tours, LPGA tours, is sort of David's legs when David is somewhere else. And Sean Hogan is himself an accomplished master teacher and a great player. And I think many years ago, he played, on the Irish national team. Tremendous player, and he has a great working intellect of the golf swing, and can really articulate, what a player needs to do. So you're going to have a lot of fun with Sean Hogan when you come on. He's just a blithe spirit and just a fountain of information.
Awesome. Oh, that's great. Well, if you don't mind, I've received over the last few months, and actually over the last couple of years now that we've been doing the podcast, I receive questions and requests from listeners from all over the world, and that's the thing that I just love about the podcast, is that unlike radio, we are talking to a global audience, but they're all golfers. They're all interested in the same thing, and that's trying to find ways to improve their game and enjoyment of the game. And so, if you don't mind, I'd like to take a couple of the questions that we've received and ask you your thoughts about what they're asking.
Well, you go right ahead. Hopefully, I can give you some some good answers here.
All right, well, let's start here from Tom Diedrich, and he signs it as frustrated in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I started playing in July of 2007, so he's only been playing just over a year, but he's already addicted. And so far this year, he's played over 50 rounds and has had more than 15 lessons. And here's what he writes. I started the year scoring 110 to 120, and in August and September, I was scoring 92 to 108 with an average score of about 100. He's still not broken 90. But over the last 3 weeks, he hasn't gotten his score below 98 and have mostly been in the 101 to 105 range, and he feels like he's getting much worse. And of all the things that he's learned, the most effective for his been is to try to stay calm and confident. But lately, he's lost a lot of his confidence. He says he's never been a very good liar, and he sure can't BS himself. So when he addresses the ball and he knows that his chances of having a good shot have decreased, which kills his confidence, which lowers his chance of having a good shot. It seems to be that to be confident, you can't be completely honest with yourself, which just doesn't work with him.
Well, all right, Tom Diedrich, from Fort Wayne, Indiana. And the one thing I would say, to him is you can't be completely honest with yourself to be confident. I think, that's nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, in order to really be supremely confident, you have to be totally honest with yourself and your capabilities. But, a lot of people want to talk about being cool, calm, collected, and confident in order to play great golf. And what I have found at almost every level, Fred, is that this whole notion about being totally relaxed, totally in the zone to play great golf, it's really, there's not, there is some truth to it. But, for the most part, I think a lot of great athletes, have, elevated levels of arousal and maybe perhaps even negative anxiety, perhaps even a little bit of fear. What they do have, though, to counter, those feelings of apprehension and trepidation, they have a plan, they have, a focused mind, a directed mind that says, this is what I'm going to do. And what Tom is doing, he's already setting up in his mind a label. He has a target score that he's trying to hit. He's trying to shoot. And as the round goes on, he's probably more aware of his mental scorecard than he is just by taking each shot as it comes and being totally into executing with purpose and conviction into each and every shot. And that's where, the golf ball doesn't really care how confident or non-confident, diffident is the word, that you are. All the golf ball, responds to is that strike, as we talked about earlier. But that's why you can't lie to yourself. You can't fake it. You cannot fake this notion of competence because, it's going to be reflected. Whatever you bring to the golf ball will reflect, your thoughts and your behavior. So what I would tell Tom is let's let go of trying, to actually break, 95 or get down into the low 90s or even break into the high 80s. Let's see if we can keep a psychological scorecard at the end of the day and say, did I step into the ball at the end of my round or even during the whole course of the day? Did I really give each shot great effort, total commitment, total involvement for my plan? Did I execute my process? Did I stay in my routine? And then did I accept each shot without judgment, without, the negativity? Did I hold myself emotionally hostage? Because I think really as the end of the season's going on here, and I know in Indiana when it comes around time for Labor Day, there's only a certain amount of days, and I know that what Tom is doing, he's sort of looking at the calendar going, I've had, 5, 6, 7 months of play, and I still haven't, hit my target score yet. And now I'm getting worse, and I'm getting more frustrated. So the harder he tries, the more pressure he's putting on himself, and he's not staying composed, and he's not actually staying, in focus. So what I would say to Tom is, Tom, let's drop the scorecard, and let's forget about that, because now you're becoming mentally bound to the numbers. Let's now get into how good or how well can I actually stay focused on each and every shot, and then let's total it up at the end. And I think if he does that, I think he's going to have, he's going to find himself so immersed in the activity that at the end of the round, he'll total it up at the end and say, wow, I didn't realize I was doing that well. And that's really what everybody does, Fred. I think a perfect example of being totally immersed in the activity was this year at the Ryder Cup with Anthony Kim playing Sergio Garcia, and he goes on to win, and he actually goes to the next hole. The match is already over, and people are saying, Anthony, where are you going? He's going, I'm just playing the next hole. And what he was showing here, and everybody thought that he was just clowning around, and he should have been more aware. No, that just tells you he was really into the day. He was into his task. He was just moving from one shot to another shot. He was moving from the completion of that hole to the next tee. And to me, that talks about total absorption into his activity. And that's really what happens when we play our very best golf. We get totally interested in playing golf versus playing the game of score. And it sounds like Tom from Fort Wayne has gotten so immersed in the score because he's always asking himself, probably during the round, how am I doing? How am I doing? And instead of saying, how am I doing, you should be asking yourself, what's my task? What do I need to do now for this shot? And the sooner you can do that, the better off you're going to be.
Fabulous. Well, it's interesting because it leads into another question that we received from Paul Tarvadas in Toronto, Canada. And he asked, how should I keep track of my score without thinking about it? He's a high handicapper, and he's found that he needs to tally his score as he goes along, or else he's going to be faced with an embarrassing situation of not being able to write down his score while going green to tee. So he says, I've discovered that keeping this running tally in my head can affect my present shot, adding more pressure to make it. I've tried using different score-keeping gizmos, but they don't help, and I tend to forget to use them, especially after a disappointing shot. So, how does he keep track of his score without thinking about what he's doing?
I'll tell you what, Fred, this is probably one of the number one afflictions that people have, that golfers have. It's called scoritis. And we suffer from a visual condition called scoropia. That is, we have the scorecard right in front of our face. Right. And we cannot see the golf course because our focus, our mind, even our emotion is just lost in the scorecard. I mean, think about this, and for everyone listening in, what is the first thing that people ask you when you come in from a round of golf, when you're there at the 19th hole?
How'd you shoot?
Yeah, how'd you shoot, which doesn't mean how'd you shoot or how'd you play.
No, it's what's your score?
What's your score?
Yeah.
Exactly right, Fred. And because if someone said, well, how'd you play? And you give them this type of response. You say, well, I really felt I was hitting my fairway woods pretty well, and I was hitting my no. They'll say, no, I don't want to hear about that. Mm-hmm. What did you shoot? It's always about that bottom line. So we are sort of taught at a very early age, how you doing? What's the score? This is the bottom line. So we really have this scoritis. And one of the things I'm always trying to help my players understand, especially those who are qualifying for a high school team, a collegiate team, or qualifying for a tour event. We have Q schools coming up, both PGA, LPGA, Futures Tour, Senior Tour. Everyone's qualifying now this time of season. I mean, score is important. But in order to have a great bottom line, you have to be able to get into the present moment. So what I would tell Paul is this is what you need to do. At the completion of the hole, walking from the green to your cart or to your golf bag or whatever, pull the scorecard out of your pocket, write down the score, write down your playing partner's score. Then, upon recording the scores, fold it over, stick it back in your golf bag or put it back in your pocket, and then you have to do what we call a mental park job. You mentally park that scorecard, and you have to tell yourself, I'm not going to think about score. All I'm thinking about is I'm going to be refreshed and energized walking up to the next tee for this next shot, because that's all I have. What I've just done is the history. It's the past. It is the result, and it is what it is. And no matter how much you contemplate, think about it, worry about it, that result will not change itself. So what I have to be able to tell each player is to be able to park that mental scorecard, to write it down, but park that scorecard and put it in your back pocket. I'll tell you one of the very best examples I've seen, and it was the late Payne Stewart. and I had the chance, to work with his son, Aaron, who now plays for the SMU men's golf team, a wonderful player, just like his father. But when Payne was playing Phil Mickelson there at Pinehurst in 1999, and he walks off the 17th green and he's walking to the 18th tee, you will see in the archived films, you will see Payne Stewart stopping momentarily, writing down his score, and then putting it back in his pocket. And I remember saying to Aaron, I said, this is one of the beautiful lessons that your father has left us as his legacy as a great player. And it was a tremendous, tremendous thing. I thought if everybody could see that, that's how you play one shot at a time. And that's how you sort of forget about the score, you park it, and you let it go. And then what you have to do, and I have a lot of players do it, is that if they start to think about score, they start to become a little bit aware of how am I doing, this is what I need to shoot on this hole, I need to make birdie. I instantly tell them, slap yourself in the side, tap your leg, tap your hat, take your hat off, tell yourself, you know what, my mind's in the wrong place. And then when I put my hat back on or I tap myself on the leg, that is what we call a cognitive behavioral signal that says, okay, I've got my mind right where it needs to be. I'm now back into this shot. I've let go of the score. So to me, that's really what I would tell Paul, is that you've got to be able to park that scorecard, park that score, and let that mental runoff in your head, you've got to let it pass. Because it is perhaps one of the toughest things to do, because 99% of all golfers from this point forward, Fred, even after I do, this recording with you, it will still be true that people will still come up to the 19th hole and say, hey, Fred, how'd you do? What'd you shoot?
Yeah.
And you can give them, everything. Here's how I played, and this is how I felt. They'll say, I don't want to hear about that stuff.
Yeah.
And the main reason, I think, Fred, that people do that is that people don't care what you shoot. They really don't. The only reason they ask you what you shot
is because they want to know they did better.
That's right. They want to compare themselves, and that's basic human nature.
Back to ego.
Yeah, if Fred Green, is a great player at my club, and I actually, defeated Fred Green today, hey, by virtue of comparison, and that's really how we develop a sense of what we call confidence by comparison. If you, are the club champ and you shoot a low score, and I happen to beat you on this one given day in a tournament, wow, that means, I'm a pretty good golfer too. And that's what we do our whole lives. We do it in academia. We do it in the classroom. We do it in the business world. We vie to be number one. That's how we do it. But, in golf, we've got to remember, and it still comes back to the first thing we said at the beginning of the program, golf ball doesn't care. And here's another thing. The golf course certainly doesn't care. And that's the challenge in golf is, are you going to allow your mind to be in the moment and to let go of, the score? Can you play one shot at a time? Are you able to really get your total mind, body, and soul into playing one shot at a time to the best you can, each shot, all day, for the duration of the day, and then total it up at the end? Boy, if you can do that, Fred, you're really, now you've become a player of the game.
Yeah. I want to get into target-oriented golf. I want to get into talking about, having a mental target about when you play. But there's one more question I want to ask you from a listener first, and then we'll get to that. This is from Scott Smith in Raleigh, North Carolina. He says, we always hear about Tiger and how great his concentration is and how his father used to make all kinds of noise when he was swinging to help him focus. Well, if all that is true, why is it that he gets so distracted on the tee by, say, a camera? Someone taking a picture? Shouldn't all of his training allowed him to swing through any noises or movement? And if he gets so distracted, what chance do us mere mortals have?
Well, I think, that's a pretty good question.
Yeah.
And the main thing I can say to that is that many times when we're playing, golf, and we're in a recreational round, and we're actually out playing, and then, the greenskeeper comes up with the mower, or there's a dog barking, or there's an aircraft going overhead, what happens is that because it's sort of a constant stream of audio information, it doesn't really disrupt us because we know it's there. It's sort of that sporadic, unanticipated audio signal that sort of disrupts this a little bit. But what you have to also understand, I think we need to kind of cut Tiger a little slack here, because he has this traveling army, this entourage of photographers who are constantly shuffling, constantly moving, trying to get the perfect shot at, just the half second after impact. And many times they have sort of, shooter trigger finger. They snap the camera. And it can disrupt. But the whole point I'm always trying to talk about is that's really what ultimate concentration is. Concentration isn't just the ability to focus on one thing to the exclusion of all others. It's the ability to focus in on the sensory system that you're processing information in. And if you are in the visual system, you aren't in the auditory system. You really aren't in the tactile system. And that's the point. We transfer and transport ourselves instantaneously from one system to another to sort of combine all the senses. So there's been many times when a player is totally immersed, like you or me, Fred, and the listeners. If you just go back in your mind and think about it, is that when you had great focus, great concentration, and there was disruption, there was noise all around you, you went ahead and hit the shot. You weren't even aware of it. And the same thing happens each and every day. And a lot of people want to talk about the Zen states, peak performance states, getting into the zone. I think we do that all the time. We get ourselves in front of the TV. We get ourselves totally immersed, totally interested in a show. And, people are yelling at us in the background. We don't even hear them. In fact, we are not even distracted by them, because we are so engaged in that interchange between the television and ourselves. And I think that's really what happens in great golf. In Tiger's case, I think, we'd have to ask Tiger, but I can tell you this, is that when I see Tiger, when I'm out on tour, is that he has great ability to focus, to shut everything else out. And if you have to understand also, here we have, the number one player in the world, perhaps arguably the greatest player of all time. And everyone is looking at every swing he makes with a microscopic and telescopic lens. So anything that he does is magnified 10,000 times more than any other player ever. So I think, sometimes I marvel at Tiger's ability to not only to sort of back away, but I marvel at his ability to refocus, recommit, and then step in and hit a marvelous shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's the point I would actually tell this question, and
Scott,
the person
right. Scott
I would say, hey, listen, I know it happens to Tiger, it happens to everyone. Yes, it's that unanticipated interruption, but I think he does a pretty good job, and we see him many times even stopping the swing at the top. Not so much when he's coming down, but he can stop it at the top. And it's ever so slightly, he'll come down and he'll flinch, and he won't actually make a swing or a pass at the ball. And that takes great strength, physical strength, but also takes a great mental strength as well, to actually say, oh, stop, I'm going to catch myself. So hopefully that answers that question. That's a tough one. Yeah. That's a tough one to answer, though.
Sure. Let me talk to you about target orientation, because we've had people talking about that on the show, and we talk frequently on the mental part of the game and being in the moment and trying to not get distracted and stepping away if you have to. But the mental aspect of target golf, of picking a target, staying on it, staying focused on it, especially when it seems like halfway through your shot process, you're changing your target. You're initially looking at something off in the distance, and then when you step up to the ball, you change the focus from that thing out there to the ball itself.
Well, I think you're exactly right. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to detach ourselves from the ball, from being ball-bound, and actually attach and connect ourselves to our target. And you have to understand, Fred, golf is a game of targets. It is a game of ultimate targets, primary targets, secondary targets. And any day, there are multiple targets in golf. And sometimes, even on the putting green when we're putting, the hole, obviously, is the ultimate target. But to have a target in order for the ball to travel on the ball roll line going to the target, to the ultimate target, which is the hole, you have to have a primary target. You have to have a launch point, in your planning so the ball can go out there. So instead of, having people say the old mental saying, be the ball, you need to be the ball, I think we'd be a lot better served to be the target. I love what Ray Floyd said, and I think Raymond was probably one of the real first pioneers to really talk about vision, visualization, mental training, and he talks a lot about, the power of positive visualization and committing to your shot. But he said something I thought was really appropriate for this discussion, and he said, amateurs stare at the ball and merely glance at the target. Professionals, on the other hand, glance at the ball and really stare intently at the target. Now, there's a real big difference there.
Wow.
And I love that because what he says with that is he's saying instead of actually becoming so attached to the ball and becoming ball-bound and self-aware, is that you need to really get out there to where the ball is going, where you want the ball to go, and instead of actually responding so much to the mechanical or the components of your swing and trying to coerce a swing, you just merely look at where you want to go and then step up there and swing the club, and hit the ball, through the ball, to the target. And I've always loved Dr. Gary Wyron. One of his great, putting instruction or swing instruction advice was you swing through the ball to the target. And, that whole notion about, target, because I've always told people, the great Harvey Penick used to tell Tom Kite and Ben Crenshaw, take dead aim. He was talking about getting their focus into the target. And that's what I've always tried to help people to do. I always talk about 3 words. I always say stay on target, which means, getting your focus, getting your vision, getting all of your sensory systems into the task. But where do we want the ball to go? We want it to go to a specific target. That's where we want it to go. And I think that's really what great targeting is. It's sort of like your mind, your brain, is your navigation system. Same way we have a navigation system in the car. If you put in great information, this is where I want to go, here's a precise location, your navigation system will take you right there. But if you put in, poor information, you put in a misdirection, you put in someplace where you don't want to go, the navigation system will take you there, the same way with your brain. And I'm always, amazed by golfers when they step up, into a ball, into the address position. I say, okay, tell me your plan. And they go, what? I go, what is it that you're really trying to do with this shot? Where do you want the ball to go? Well, and they'll sort of give me some clouded answer. I say, no, I want you to specifically tell me, where do you want this ball to end up? And they'll say, oh, I want it to go right there. I said, well, I'll tell you what. Let's begin with that end in mind. Let's begin, with saying, okay, here's where I want this ball to go. Now, what are you going to have to do in order to get that ball to go there? But let's not forget that, this is what, we're trying to do. We're actually going to make a plan so this ball goes from point A to point B. So when I say be the target, I don't want you to be the ball. The ball is just getting in the way of the club head, moving through the ball impact area, swinging to the target. So be the target. And that's the biggest thing I see at almost every academy, that I've ever been associated with, even at our David Leadbetter Golf Academy. The people who are at the academy, my job is to help them get from, the practice or the training area out into the performance arena, which is the golf course. So when they are, practicing, when golfers are practicing, they are becoming self-aware. They're actually, reflecting and actually working on their swings, on the technical components of their swing. But also at the same time, I think it's beneficial to them to work on their pre-shot routines so that now they get into planning their target, committing to their target, and then stepping in the ball and then actually swinging to their target using their new developed skill. And I think that really is where we have a nice transfer effect between training what you're learning on the mechanical to actually trusting it and transferring it to the performing stage and trusting it on the golf course.
in looking at your website and having discussions with you, setting up this conversation, there's a product that you're now endorsing that enhances that whole concept, correct?
Yeah, it's called the Golf Ring. And I was first approached, by some friends about the Golf Ring, and it's this great targeting device, and it's so simple. The genius in this device, Fred, is that it is a 6-foot circular piece of what I would call durable string, and it can actually be folded into an 18-inch circle, and you can just put in your golf bag. But what it does, you can actually put it around the flag, and now you have a 6-foot diameter circle around the flag. And from the center of the cup, which would be the core, you have a radius of 3 feet. And how the Golf Ring first came about, when we want to talk about targets, it was developed by a friend of, the president's. He had this idea that he was talking to his young son who wanted to play golf. He was about 4 or 5 years old. And he said, I want you to see how close you can get it to the hole. And the son said, well, how close you want me to hit it? He says, well, I want you to imagine a 3-foot circle around the hole.
And he said that to a little kid?
Yeah, he said to a little kid. Little kid said, I can't.
What's a 3-foot circle to a little kid?
Yeah, exactly. He goes, I don't know really what a 3-foot circle is, Dad. Mm-hmm. He goes, what's it look like? And for years, Fred, as being in golf education for, 38, 40 years, is that, we've used hula hoops, we've used towels, we've used tees, we've used all sorts of different target location devices. But what this father, who is a great, inventor, and they always say necessity is the mother of invention, but creativity is the father of invention. So this creation, filled a need for his son to understand what a 3-foot circle was. So he actually designed this and had, this string, this monofilament line that is, very durable. And when you open it up, it opens up, to this 6-foot circle. So he put it around this flag, and he said, all right, son, I want you and your friends to go out there and see how many you can actually hit inside the circle. And just by practicing and really understanding that, and now having an enhanced image of this is where I need to go, the circle actually draws the eyes into the ultimate target, which is the hole, and that is further illuminated by the flagstick. So now, just by looking and having a target gaze with the Golf Ring, people's mental visual skill training is enhanced. And you don't even have to try to actually get better with this. And the old saying is, you can look, but still not see. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole point. Now all you have to do is just have a nice gaze on your target. Because I find one of the biggest things that most amateur golfers do not do is that they don't take enough looks at their target. And what happens once they get over the ball, they have too much time over the ball, and they have forgotten where their target is. And what the Golf Ring does is that it helps enhance and illuminate where your eyes need to focus. And the device was so simple. When I saw it, I called up the president and I said, I've been in sports vision and sports psychology for years now. And I said, this device, I've heard so much about it. Let me see it, and I'll see if I can't do something with it. He sent me a lot of these different golf rings, and in it there's a 6-foot ring, but there's also what they call the spot ring, which is an 18-inch ring, and you can put it around the hole to even further make concentric circles around the center of the hole, which it makes it sort of like a dartboard.
Yeah, like a target. It's just a perfect target.
It's a perfect target, and what's so nice, because the diameter of the line is that you can actually chip and putt on the green, and you can actually chip to this, and the actual line itself doesn't impede the ball's roll. So you get, a pretty true picture. But what I loved about it, and I told, the president, I said, here's what I love about this product. I said, I can hit 15 to 20 balls from off the green, pitching, chipping, putting, whatever. But when it's done, because I have that circle around the hole, and I have that schematic, I have that diagram, it gives me a scatter plot, and it tells me, was my practice, was my skill training effective? And I can actually see how many I have in the ring.
Yeah.
And so, I'm very, very pleased to be with, the Golf Ring, and I'm endorsing it. And I'll tell you what, I really believe, in the next 6 months to a year, that anybody who has this can really lower their scores, because that's really what most people forget, is that we always say, as sports psychologists, golf educators, 100 yards and in, 100 yards and in. What I'm always trying to help people with, 5-6 steps from off the green, because that's the area where you miss the green. If you can become more effective getting this ball up and down from just off the green with what I call the little stinker shots, the little chips, the little pitches, if you can get those up and in or up and down, you will actually cut off so many strokes, because 68% to 70% of the strokes in golf are from about 75 yards and into, the hole.
Right.
They aren't the really big drives. They aren't the approach shots. It's the short game. And the golf ring is probably the single one device that I've seen that everyone needs to have, and I think every golf instructor, every golf range, every sports psychologist, every performance consultant, golf instructor, they need to have this as part of their arsenal. So I'm really excited about it. I've used now, the golf ring and the team packs and the spot rings with several of my college teams. And each college team, men and women, they really swear by it now, and they say, they're really, starting to get into the winner's circle, both individually and collectively as a team. It is as simple but as genius as the paperclip is to an office supply. It truly is. It's an amazing device, and I hope everybody gets one.
Dr. Bob, it's such a pleasure to speak to you again, and also we see you on the Golf Channel on a regular basis. Congratulations on that. But the fact that you're on the Golf Channel and are willing to come to Golf Smarter, it's just we're just really pleased and honored that you would give us your time.
Well, Fred, I'll tell you what, congratulations to you and Golf Smarter, because, you're putting out some great information, and I was glad to do it. I think when we first started with Golf Smarter just a couple of years ago, and now, look what's happened. You've got, you've just done so many great shows, but it's really an honor to be with you, and please, let's don't make it another 2 years before we do this again.